Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the On the Record podcast. This week, I'm joined by KBTX News 3 sports reporter, MMJ Morgan Weaver. Morgan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the reasons why I brought you on the show today was because I feel like you and I, even though this is the first time we're meeting, there's a lot of similarities in our careers, especially because you graduated 3 years ago. I graduated 3 years ago. And I feel like there's been like a big trend, at least in journalism, of like a lot of younger reporters kind of like getting into these big time opportunities and these big moments, winning awards, doing all these things. For you, you've been in a small market now for, I think, 3 years, right? You were there at KBTX since you graduated, right?
Yes, that's correct. I've been here since June of 2021.
Yeah. And so you've been in that market for a minute. What has it been like just to kind of be in a small market as a reporter and in that sort of thing? And how do you feel like it differs? Or just kind of what is the perspective like as a reporter in that smaller market?
Yeah, so I definitely think, they tell you this when you're in school, but the small market, wherever your first job is, it's going to be a grind. And it definitely has been. But I think it's just one of those jobs. And this is one of those industries where you pay your dues and you work your way up. And I have been so grateful for the opportunity to have KBTX be my first job because it is a smaller market, but it's not, no offense, it's not like a Montana or anything one of those. I think my goal for my first job was to be in a big college town, and I certainly got that being in College Station, Texas, where Texas A&M is. And I mean, outside of football, all of their sports usually perform very well. So I've had great opportunities to be able to do things. But yeah, definitely small market to mid market is certainly a grind. You're shooting everything yourself, you're editing everything yourself, and then you're going back and anchoring everything that you just put together. So small market, it's a grind, but it's super rewarding. It's where I think you learn the most and you certainly grow the most in your career.
Yeah, and you mentioned College Station and all that stuff. I mean, I can imagine going from Maryland to, what is it, Brazos in Texas or whatever?
Brazos Valley, yeah, Brazos County.
Going from Maryland to there, I mean, could be quite of a jump. Was it an adjustment for you when you first started?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge adjustment because I'm born and raised in Maryland. I didn't know anything else. I mean, that's where I went to school, to the University of Maryland. And so when I first got my offer, I was like, where's College Station? I had no idea. The only thing I knew about Texas A&M and this town was like Johnny Manziel and that 7 overtime football game they had against LSU. That's all I ever knew about it. But I knew, again, like I said, your first job, you never know where it's going to be or the position you're going to be in. It's all about kind of betting on yourself and taking that risk. And I don't know about you, but we were taught that in journalism school. It's like, you don't know where you're going to be. You just got to say yes and take the opportunity and see where it takes you.
Oh, yeah, I can totally attest to that, like taking risks. I mean, like just to kind of give you a better idea of my career, like I was at San Diego State, and then I'm a born and raised native San Diegan, so I've lived here my whole life.
Yeah.
And one of my professors used to work at the NBC affiliate here, NBC 7, and he reached out to, we had a news director come speak to our class over Zoom, and this was during COVID when all this stuff was going down. He was speaking to our class over Zoom. And then my professor who used to work there, like forwarded my name to him and was like, you got to just apply to this job. And I was a little bit mull about it. Like, I wasn't sure, like, okay, whatever. And then I reached out to him, didn't hear back. And then I reached out again like 2 weeks later. And then all of a sudden they were like, yeah, we might, we don't have anything open, but, we'll keep your name in the hat. And that ultimately led to them getting me a part-time job where I had I think I worked like Friday, Saturday, and I was balancing that and school at the same time during COVID. And then after I graduated, they ended up making me full-time. And since then, the rest has been history after that. I've won Emmys and I've done all that stuff. And it's
I mean, it's all about getting your first foot in the door kind of, and just seeing where that takes you. And it's a huge business where networking pays off, and just being able to, like you said, put your name in the hat. I've gotten that advice so many times. Just like, even if there's not an opening at a station, sending an email just so they know your names. Be like, hey, like, I know you don't have any openings right now, but this is a market I'd really like to be in, or this is a station I really admire, and just send them your stuff and get your name out there, because you never know when they're going to have an opening. And then if you apply, they're like, oh, I've seen that name before. They've reached out to me. So I think that's awesome that you did that and you got that start that way.
Yeah. I always say to the people who ask me for advice, I think the biggest thing is like, just take chances on yourself, because ultimately this field is about taking chances. And just like in life, you never know what you're going to get, right? Like anything can happen at any moment.
Yeah, for sure. And it's such a competitive industry too, that I think that's one of those things that can set you apart, because I know not everybody is sending those kind of emails or just putting themselves out there in that kind of way. So for sure.
Yeah. And I just wanted to kind of go back even before you went to Maryland. Like what kind of drew you to journalism in the first place? Like what was like sort of your earliest journalism memory?
Yeah, so I wasn't somebody that like I always knew what I wanted to do. My dad is a lawyer, so I thought about law school a little bit. I've always been interested in history and politics, and then I played sports growing up my whole life. So it all kind of revolved around those certain like facets, but I wasn't for sure. But I remember my grandma says that one day I said it's what I wanted to do. But my first memory of where I was like, oh, I could do this, I was just sitting around with my dad and we were just watching some football game. I think it was like the Division II national championship game at the time. And we were just like talking about it, just spitballing about the game. And he's like, you know, you could like do this for a living. And that's when I really thought about it. And then I applied to Maryland's journalism school and I got in. It's a great school. And so it's kind of like, why would I not do this? Even then, though, when I got into school, I didn't know if I wanted to do, because Maryland's right outside of DC. So a lot of students want to do political reporting and things like that. So I didn't know for sure if I want to do sports or politics. But sports is just so fun. It's just a part of my family. We always played sports, watched sports. It was always sports in school. That's just what the Weaver household revolved around. And so it seemed like a no-brainer for me to get into sports. It just brings so many different kinds of people together. And a lot of times I like to say, no matter how long the day is or what I'm doing, at the end of the day, I'm getting paid to watch sports and talk about sports. And that's the dream.
Yeah, I always say there's like I think there's an Asian proverb that's like, if you love something, and it's like, it's not even, you wouldn't work a day in your life if you love it.
Yeah, if you love what you do, you're never working a day in your life.
Yeah. I always say like, that's kind of what drew me into journalism too, especially because I love sports too. And so it's like, when you love it so much, it's almost like, you know, you don't even feel like you're even stressing or while you're at work, right? You don't even feel like you're going to work. So what kind of sports did you play in growing up?
Yeah, so I think like most kids, my parents put us in soccer. So I played soccer from when I was like 4 until I graduated high school. Same with basketball, but also dabbled in swimming a little bit. Took tennis lessons one time, but watched and played as many sports as possible. My favorite by far to cover and when I was playing was basketball, though.
What was it about basketball that was your favorite?
I think it's just such a fun game. I think also professional wise, the NBA is my favorite as well. I think there's just so many characters and you can allow your personality to show a little bit more. Covering wise, it's fast paced, it's indoors, which I appreciate, especially in Texas. So basketball has just always been my favorite. I love the game. I love the history and culture behind it. So basketball has just always been it for me. I don't know. And also growing up in the Northeast, it's part of the culture up there. There's so many great players that reign from the DMV. And so, yeah, I just grew up watching basketball a lot.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I know you cover a variety of sports. You've done like football, you've done high school, volleyball. I think you even did rodeos, right? I can imagine being in Texas, right? You've done rodeos too.
I've done, so A&M has an equestrian team. And so last year, the SEC championships for equestrian were at Texas A&M. So I've covered equestrian before, but I rode horses a little bit growing up. So I love just getting out there. They have a beautiful barn and facilities. So whenever I have a chance to go out to the equestrian team, I will, just to see the horses, and the girls are always great. So I have not covered any rodeos yet. I have been to a rodeo since being in Texas. We just, you gotta go if you're in Texas. We went to the Houston rodeo last year, which is a big deal here. So haven't covered one yet, but I feel like I'm pretty capable of covering any sport at this point.
Yeah. Do you have any? I mean, I'm guessing I can assume that basketball was probably your favorite to cover, but like, did you have any that you enjoy doing with your job right now, or do you enjoy all of them?
I mean, I enjoy all of them. I always tell people football is a close second to basketball, but a lot of times I say, like, don't take for granted the sports don't get covered as much, like softball and golf and tennis, because those are the players that remember you and are even more so grateful for the stories that you tell about them. But yeah, I've covered everything from tennis, swimming, basketball, track, like you name it, I've covered it. But yeah, definitely basketball is my favorite. One that I didn't think I would like as much because going to the University of Maryland, baseball wasn't that big of a deal. I think just baseball in the Big Ten isn't what it is compared to in the SEC. But then my first year I got here in Texas A&M, went to Omaha, and I got to go to the College World Series and see them win their first game there ever as a program. And then, of course, this past year they went all the way to the finals. But college baseball was something that I was not super familiar with, and now it's like one of my favorites to cover just because I think it's so fun.
I know I watch it on TV and I'm like surprised at how intense the environment is among the fans, especially because I feel like that doesn't get as much television coverage compared to the other sports like football and basketball and things like that. Like, do you notice that too?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to the SEC environments and to A&M's park. It's called Bluebell Park. But they have their own traditions. I feel like every team does. I know Tennessee has that big fur coat they put on their players. A&M used to literally have a hotel trolley that they'd push them through in the dugout. And I know you're not allowed to have the accessories on the field anymore, but I just think SEC baseball is built different. It's so fun. The fans are so into it and they're paying attention to the game so much. I think that's why it's so intense. I don't think you really see that in the MLB, which is why I like college baseball a little bit more. The guys are still so young and so into it. Like I said, the fans, they know what the count is every single time. They know the pitcher's name. They're yelling the opposing team's pitcher's name. They'll probably know his girlfriend's name too, yelling her name. So I can only speak to A&M, but they have their traditions and they have an awesome student section that shows out no matter who you're playing. But when conference play starts in the SEC, baseball is a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I know your job's taken you to a lot of like incredible venues. I mean, NRG Stadium, which I've been there. That's been an awesome venue to go to. Kyle Field, Hard Rock, Omaha, like you mentioned. Do you have any favorite venues that you've covered as a reporter that you've been at?
It's hard not to just say Kyle Field because it is, I think it might be the second biggest in college. It's the biggest stadium in Texas. It is so loud, especially, I mean, I just covered the Texas versus Texas A&M football game, their first time playing each other again in 13 years. And while I don't think the game was the best, it didn't go in A&M's favor. It was the best college football environment I've ever been in. And Kyle Field is just different. So it's easy for me to say that. I think another great stadium I've been to is Jordan-Hare Stadium where Auburn plays. I was there a couple years ago. It was a night game for Texas A&M and Auburn, and their fans are crazy. They have I don't know who their DJ is. They have a great DJ. They have a light show. They got the eagle flying around the stadium pregame. So that was another one of my favorites that I've been to. But another one, when I was in college, I went to, it happened twice my junior year, the 2019-2020 season, right before COVID hit. Maryland and Michigan State were both ranked like in the top 15, and they had college game day in Lansing and then also in College Park. But Michigan State's arena was really, really cool. It just feels like the fans are on top of you. It was so loud. I'm trying to think. I think Cassius Stanley was on the team that year. It was a really good team. Obviously, Tom Izzo is like March himself. If March was a person, it'd be Tom Izzo. But it was just a really, really great environment. I mean, the Xfinity Center for Maryland was always great when I was in college as well. But yeah, again, final answer is Kyle Field so far. I haven't been in a better environment than Kyle Field. But I've heard other stadiums, like I haven't been to Neyland for Tennessee yet, and I haven't been to Death Valley to see LSU's stadium, but I've heard those two are pretty top tier too.
Yeah, when I went to go see San Diego State in the Final Four in Houston, that was when I went to go see NRG Stadium for the first time, and I was just like blown away by how massive it is. Because I think, and mind you, Kyle Field is obviously bigger than that, right? So it's like, were you kind of like, I don't want to say did you ever get nervous, but like, do you feel a different type of energy when you're in a venue like that and you're covering college football in that environment?
Yeah, I always say like I'll stop doing the job when I don't get excited or feel the energy of the stadium anymore and I'm not like happy to be there, but it's hard not to be. Like I still feel the energy in those big moments when you're in Kyle Field and you just look around and everybody in unison is also, they're standing the entire game, the 12th man is. So it's hard not to feed off that energy, but no, you don't really get nervous. You just get excited and you're like, I'm so happy to be here. Like, this is why we do the job. This is why we got into it to begin with, to be able to cover games and moments like this.
Yeah. And what was like your most memorable sports reporting moment that you've had in your career so far?
Oh, I think a couple come to mind when they're both at A&M because that's been my career so far. A&M taking down Alabama my first year. That was crazy. And then it was another Alabama game, but it was basketball. I don't think it was 2 years ago. Alabama, it was when Brandon Miller was still on the team. They were ranked number 2 in the country at the time. And it was the last home game of the season right before the SEC tournament began, but they beat number 2 Alabama, and they stopped them from storming the court. But it was just a great game, and it's cool to see how far A&M basketball's come since I first got here, and just the way they call themselves. It's Reed Arena, and the student section calls themselves the Reed Rowdies. Just the way that they've. They're not a basketball school yet, but I think if they continue in the right direction, they could be. It's cool to see how that arena and the culture of basketball here has grown. But definitely those 2 A&M beating Alabama moments are my favorite so far.
Yeah, I always say it's crazy especially when you go to a college or you cover a school that like isn't strong in a sport, but then as you go there, then they start to get better. I know San Diego State has been a basketball powerhouse for like a while, so it's like and for me, like what I always treasure about that is like growing up in San Diego, my dad and I would go to games like all the time. Like we still have season tickets, so I've been going since I was like 10 years old, and so seeing them kind of make this rise into like a pinnacle moment or the Final Four or other things like that. Like I can imagine like as a reporter, like just kind of being able to see that happen is kind of an awesome feeling, right?
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And you're supposed to be unbiased, but it's always more fun when the teams that you're covering are playing well. So you always want them to do well and you want them to continue to grow. And even for A&M football this year, I mean, it's their head coach's first year, and just seeing him pull out an 8-win season in his first year, and they're going to a pretty good bowl game, and they're playing USC in Vegas. It's just cool to see programs change and grow, and just happy to be able to witness it and cover it.
I always ask journalists this question when they come on my show. I always say athletes always have their welcome to the pros moment, and I always say for journalists, there's kind of like a welcome to journalism moment that we all experience. Do you have any sort of moment or experience that comes into mind?
That's a good question. I think my welcome to journalism, or like this career moment, would be that first trip to Omaha, because you really don't know what you're getting into with big events like that. And it was me and one other person, and we drove. It's a 12-hour drive, and you're covering an event that people have watched since they were growing up, and it's a dream event for people to cover. And I got to do it and see them win that first game and then hit a live shot right afterwards. I think that was my like, okay, you're here. This is what you want to do. This is what you signed up for. And it was so, I remember I was so nervous and I was so stressed because it was like my first big assignment outside of the normal things we cover. And they trusted me to go do that and cover that event. And I think I learned a lot from that trip.
Talk to me about that whole that stressful feeling, because I know, like, as reporters, especially when you're first starting, it can almost kind of take over you, right? And how do you kind of fight over those feelings? Because, you know, those are high pressure moments, like you said. And so all those things can kind of take over you, and all this stuff. How do you kind of overcome those nerves?
Yeah, for me, I always tell myself in the back of my head, I'm like, you've never not made error. It's never not worked out. Like, it's always going to work out. Like, it's always whatever's going to happen, it's going to happen, and you're going to get on air and it's going to be fine. I think how you we're not athletes, but we kind of deal with it. Like, you're like, I'm built for this moment. Right. I accept the challenge, and you just kind of roll with the punches. I think dealing with the stress, can be high stressful situations. I mean, it's live TV, but at the end of the day, you also have to remember, like, it's not life or death. It's sports and it's TV. Obviously, it's really important, but it's never that serious to get yourself so stressed about. So I always tell myself that. I'm like, it's not that serious. You're talking about sports on TV. Like, you're going to get it done and it's going to be great. So I think that's kind of how I deal with it. Just give yourself a little pep talk. You're like, I've done this before. I've done this so many times. Just, trust your experience and trust the reps that you've already put in, because you're going to be okay.
I love that. My one of my coworkers told me this, like, when I first started, and it was this whole thing of, like, no one's gonna die, no one's gonna do anything, because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're here to make air, not art. So, that's
we're not brain surgeons. We're just talking about sports on TV. It's not that serious.
Yeah, exactly. Has there been any sort of advice that you've taken throughout your career that's kind of stuck with you and still sticks with you, and you kind of take into mind?
Yeah, I think it's been kind of just be where your feet are, because I think in this industry, especially, you're always like, okay, where's like my next move gonna be? Or even like, what am I gonna cover next? What's my next big opportunity? I think it's important to look for those things and seek for those things, but also to remember that you're here in this community for this X amount of time. You don't know how long. So be where your feet are, enjoy every single opportunity. And once I started doing that, I was like, I love what I'm doing. And I started enjoying myself a little bit more. And it takes the pressure off of the constant need to move up in this industry, because it feels like a race and a competition. But I feel like once you accept where you are, then the opportunities are going to come to you. So for sure, just be where your feet are and enjoy the chapter that you're in.
I always say journalism, I don't want to say, I know this is going to sound kind of hard, but I always say, like, journalism's not built for the weak, because
it's not. It's really not.
Because I always say journalism is not built for the weak, because you really have to have a deep passion for it if you really want to continue not only staying in it, but moving up in it, in the field itself, right?
Yeah, I agree. I was just talking to my coworker about this the other day. We were trying to think of all the people in our graduating class that are still doing what we're doing. Some are using their journalism degrees in different ways, but a lot of people aren't on air or covering sports or doing what they set out to do. And whenever somebody leaves the industry, I'm like, I do not blame you. It is not easy. It is long hours. You work weekends, you work holidays. I only see my family like 2 to 3 times a year, and 3 times is generous. So yeah, it's not for the weak. It is a sacrifice, but those are all the things that they preached to us when we were in school. So I kind of expected it. It's a different thing to live it, but it's for sure not for the weak. And I'm not saying that if you do leave the industry, you're weak. Everybody that I know that leaves the industry is like, my anxiety levels have gone down, like so many things, and they enjoy what they do. So definitely sacrifices are made, and it's not as glamorous or easy as it looks like just on TV.
Yeah, I noticed the people that, especially my coworkers or my friends who do leave the industry, I noticed their face appears to be a lot more glowing, and they seem to be more happier with their job. I can't tell, I can't attest to that because I've never done that. But I do notice that quite a bit. And then as far as you working as a reporter in a small market, obviously you mentioned the challenges that you face compared to working in a bigger market, right? You're doing a lot of stuff on your own, things like that. How do you kind of find ways to stay creative and inspired in your work?
I definitely think you take inspiration from those around you and your coworkers as well. You just want to like continue because this isn't the end all be all is where you're at now. So if you're not pushing yourself to be more creative or pushing yourself to do better stories, then you're going to stay stagnant. And I think this industry, especially when you're just starting out, it's all about getting better as a reporter and progressing in your career. So it's just kind of an internal motivation kind of thing. It's like, okay, if I don't push myself, who is? So I think and you draw inspiration for obviously those around you and watching, because I'll watch bigger markets, I'll watch other reporters do stories even in different markets, because you're all across the country, but it's such a small world in this industry. So I follow so many people, like we just followed each other. We don't know each other, but you just follow people in the industry and you see what they're doing. So you draw inspiration from those close to you and those around you, and obviously the internal motivation aspect as well.
Yeah, I always say from a producer perspective, like the days are never the same, especially with, and you can understand this as a reporter, but producers too. I mean, because you're not doing the thing that you did yesterday, that sort of show or that package you're doing or you're making, whatever. It's not going to be the exact same type of scenario. You may have breaking news tomorrow. Like that whole unpredictability factor in journalism is why we stay in it to begin with, right?
Yeah, I think it's always fun. People always ask me my schedule. I'm like, it's really whenever sports is happening or whatever I got going on that day. And I think that's what keeps it interesting. I always say if like I got out of the industry, I have no idea what I would do, like what would fulfill me or like give me the adrenaline that this job does, just because it is so different every day. Like yesterday, high school playoffs in Texas is still going on. So I went out to a stadium and we only have one team left in it. So I interviewed those players. But today I'm like doing something completely different. I'm recording this podcast and then I have another podcast when I get to work. And I think we got like high school basketball on tonight. I'm not sure, but like every day is different. You're going different places, meeting new people. I think this job is so great for meeting people in the community and just getting involved where you're at. So yeah, it keeps it fun. It keeps it interesting. I think if it was too mundane and repetitive, I wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I love just I always say it brings a bunch of chaos and you have to find different ways of how to figure it out and how to handle it, especially when it comes to sports. I mean, you never know what news is going to break. I always mention that there was one time I was working on Thanksgiving, and before that I was at a basketball tournament with my dad and we were watching, I think it was USC, or we were about to watch USC play Seton Hall. And right before the game was going to start, my boss texted me like, yeah, you gotta come in. There's a brush fire. Like, so then I'm out here telling my dad like, oh, I got to leave the basketball game, to go to go do the news and stuff like that. So just the whole chaos of it, I guess, is what kind of brings us in. Right.
Yeah, and it's important to have people that are around you, and like hopefully your dad understood. But like I always say, one of the things that helps keep me going is that my family and my friends are so supportive. Like they'll send me their wedding invites and their kids' birthday invites and things like that. But they know like I'm not gonna be there, kind of thing. Like my friend just got married a Saturday in September, and I'm like, it's football season. Like, I love you. But like, they're so understanding and they know. And I think that's what helps keep you going. Cause there's definitely times you're like, oh, well, it would be nice to like be home for Thanksgiving or this and that. But having that strong support system definitely helps, I think, keep us in the industry going as well. Just understanding that we have a common goal and just like keep going type of thing.
Yeah. What does a typical reporting day look like for you? When Morgan Weaver comes into the studio, when she comes into work, what does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a weekend anchor as well. So I anchor on Saturdays and Sundays. A normal day, I can use Sunday as an example. Sunday, I went and I covered a men's basketball game. They played Texas Tech, and then I put my whole show together, and then on Sundays, we only have a 10 p.m. So I just had to put my show together and anchor the 10 p.m. But that was a long day because they played up in Fort Worth. So I drove to Fort Worth to cover that and then came back down. But, a normal like Friday is more exciting, I would say, especially during high school football season. We'll usually have a live shot in the 5 and the 6, and then you shoot the whole game. You edit those highlights to send back for a 10 p.m. show. And then during the regular season, we have a Friday Football Fever show, which I anchor with my coworker. It's 30 minutes of all high school football highlights from 11:30 to midnight. So they're really long days, especially in the fall, but it's fun. It's our bread and butter is high school football here. And so, yeah, that's, I guess, a typical day. It varies based on the season, who's still playing. It'll start to slow down a little bit when football ends. But yeah, I'd say those are typical days, kind of. But there's no like typical day.
Yeah. I always say no 2 days are the same. You mentioned high school football, and I can imagine going from, doing college and high school football in Maryland or whatever you were doing in Maryland to covering high school football in Texas, where like, that's like, I don't want to say it's on a pedestal, but it's a big deal down there, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen the show Friday Night Lights, but it's that. I definitely my welcome to Texas moment was covering high school football, honestly, because all these kids are huge. These are big kids, and pick a team, there's some kid going Division I on it, and you didn't have that when I was growing up in Maryland, or at least not. It wasn't as prominent, I guess. And especially these stadiums, they're massive, especially when you get to like the Houston and Austin and Dallas areas, because there'll be 6 schools like rotating in that stadium, sharing that stadium. So it will look like a small college stadium to some people, and sometimes even bigger. So yeah, Texas high school football is different. And again, they're still playing. State championships are until next week, and they play at AT&T Stadium, which is really cool. We usually have a team make it every year. We might not this year. It'd be my first year not going to AT&T since I've been here. But yeah, for sure, Texas high school football is everything that they say it is. And you even see that in the NFL now. Like half the guys played on some great Texas high school football team, or they played against each other.
Yeah, for sure. What's your most favorite and challenging thing about being a sports reporter in MMJ?
I think the most challenging thing, especially being an MMJ, which I don't know if everybody knows, it's a multimedia journalist. It's basically you're just doing it all yourself. I think that can be the most challenging part, because you're driving. Sometimes, like last week, the high school football playoff game I went to was 2 hours away. That's like specific to Texas because Texas is so big. But you're driving that far. You're setting up the live shot yourself. You're shooting the whole game yourself. You're editing the highlights yourself. So I think the most challenging part is you're in it by yourself, and it's only as good as the work or the effort you put into it. That's probably the most challenging. Outside of that, like personal most challenging is like I'm so family oriented and I'm away from my family and my sister. But again, I think it's all gonna be worth it.
Yeah, and I know a lot of journalists find different ways of balancing work life and personal life, especially because things like burnout and other stuff can happen very easily and also can come up on you by surprise. How do you find your own work-life balance?
Not saying that I have it all figured out, because I think that's one of the things I struggle with as well, is kind of finding a work-life balance, especially during football season, because you're just always on and you're always looking at your phone, at Twitter, and seeing what's happening right now. We have like so many guys like hitting the transfer portal, and like once you think football season's over, it's not, because you have all of the signing news and just changes and things like that. But I think a way to balance it is just taking the time for yourself, still doing the things for yourself, even if it's days that you're not off. Like my shift starts at 2. And so just taking the morning for yourself, doing things that you want to do, and also having friends that are understanding and work with your schedule as well. Because I don't know about you, but my off days are Wednesday and Thursday, and nobody else's off days are Wednesday and Thursday. So even taking those days to go do something by myself, or see if a friend wants to get dinner or things like that, it's definitely all about balance, and it's hard to do, especially with social media. And I like watching sports in my free time as well. So it's kind of hard to turn the off button on, but it's really, really important, or else, like you said, you're going to get burnt out. And I think that's what leads a lot of people to leave the industry.
Yeah, for sure. And I know one of the things that reporters deal with a lot is like kind of finding your own voice, finding your confidence, finding your writing style. I know as somebody who got in the field early, and you can attest to this too, like it's very, it's, you kind of go through a kind of a mountain trying to find that, especially because it's not easy, right? How did you kind of find your own voice, or are you still finding that, or how do you go through that?
Yeah, I definitely still think I am finding it. It's hard always to insert your personality into things. Some people do it effortlessly and so well. So that's one of the things that like I would try to work on more, is putting my personality into scripts. Writing wise, I think writings always came pretty easy to me. My favorite thing to do is feature stories and write those feature stories. So I think just finding your voice and writing styles, I think that just comes with reps and with time. It's easier because I started in college and we had like literally broadcast writing classes. And so I think that really set me up for success, but it just comes with time, like anything, and getting that experience. And one of the things I like to do is also just like watch a lot of either TV shows in the morning, sports TV shows, talk shows, and people that I admire, just see how they do things as well. I think that can help you. Or even just like in local market, be like, oh, this person, if they post like a package they did, I'm like, oh, that was written great. They shot that really creatively. And you're like, oh, I can do that. And not like copy, but like try to emulate. And like that also pushes you creatively as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say that point of emulating. Like, I know I will sometimes watch like what NBC in LA does, or what Nightly News does, or even like because I personally on Sundays I do the NBC7 Sports Wrap Show, which is like our late night 30-minute where we just wrap up all the different sports throughout the day. And sometimes like I'll even watch NBA on inside the NBA on TNT, because you like all these things, like you
Yeah.
said, you'll foster different ideas. And I don't, like I said, I don't want to say copy, but like you emulate a lot of those things,
Yeah.
right?
I feel like we can do that in our own way.
Yeah, for sure. And do you have any favorite stories that you've done throughout your career?
Yeah, like I said, my favorite thing to do is tell these feature stories. One of my favorites that I've done is with, he's no longer with the men's basketball team, but he graduated last season, but he had dreads. And at one point he cut his dreads off and was just like a low cut. And we're all like, oh, like, why'd you cut your hair? And he did it for his academic advisor at his previous school. She was diagnosed with cancer. And so he had cut his hair for her. And then we later found out like she basically helped him get through school, because he was put on like academic probation when he first got to his previous college. And she helped him be able to like learn how to study and just become eligible again and start his career. Now he's playing overseas somewhere. So, I mean, without her, you don't know if he ever would have became eligible or how his career would have panned out. So I got to Zoom with her as well. And she was just such a beautiful soul, and he's such a sweet kid. And so that's one of my favorite stories that I've done.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that, like, at least for me, one of the favorite shows that I've done definitely was when that whole chaos of like Trump getting assassination attempt, and then Biden happening the week
Yeah.
afterwards. Like, you can imagine from a news producer perspective, I was probably having like 3 heart attacks during that 1 week.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was chaos. I know that like you've gone through a lot of internships and things like that heading into your job. Can you talk about like how important those things are? Because I feel like in college, there may be some students who are shy, or who don't feel like they have the confidence necessarily to want to be able to take initiative and pursue those routes. How important were those internships that you had, and obviously this small market job? How important were those to kind of being able to grow your career and get to where you are now?
Yeah, I think I'm inherently shy too. It might not seem like it, but just putting yourself out there is super, super important. I remember my first internship was at our local TV station close to me in Hagerstown, Maryland. They now have since moved to DC, but that was my first internship, and it really gave me a look to see what my first job could be like, because that was market like 100 and something, and I'm in like 80 now. So that was like a closer comparison to see like what this job really is like, and where realistically you could be ending up for your first position. So that was a really great internship. I also interned at Pardon the Interruption. They film in DC. I'm sure you're familiar with Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon, but it's such an iconic show. And I didn't do as much like hands-on work as I did with my first internship, but it was cool to see like both sides of the spectrum. Like this is a national show versus such a small TV market. But you learn different things from that, and you also kind of like pick and choose what you want to do, because I was mainly in video editing when I was doing that internship. It's like, okay, like I could be on the production video side and still like what I do and still be working in sports. And then my third internship was with ABC7 in Arlington, Virginia, which is technically DC. That was cool because it's like top 10 market. I got to cover some Wizards events, some Capitals events. So I took a lot from those internships, and I think it's really important because you also can kind of get hands-on and see if it's what you actually want to do. And also it helps you, like we were talking about earlier, network and build relationships. I know the photog from ABC7 still keeps in touch with me, and he's like, I hope you're doing well. Like, I see your work, you're doing awesome. So I think internships are so important. I know not everybody has the privilege or the ability to be able to do internships while doing school and possibly working too. So it's something, if you can do it, for sure do it.
Yeah. I always say, like, even if you don't have time to do internships, like just networking with people, right? Listening to this podcast, talking to people, that just can get you so far, because like we mentioned, you never know what door is going to open for you. Sometimes people may find those opportunities for you. You don't even need to look. They may think you're good for those opportunities. So you just never know where things are going to start, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I still keep in touch, like I just mentioned, the ABC7 photog. He will let me know like when he knows about openings, and he's like, hey, like you should apply. The one of the people that I used to work with, she was, I think, as the weekend anchor when I was at the first internship I did. She just left a position in Charlotte, and she was like, you should apply, and like things like that. So just that networking and keeping relationships with the people that you've met in the industry are so important, because also you never know down the line when you need a mentor or somebody to look at your reel or your resume or like write a letter of recommendation. It's just important to not only get these opportunities, but also work really hard and leave a good impression when you do get these opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And one of the things I also wanted to ask you about was, and I know you post this a lot, is you have quite an extensive vinyl collection.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I do. I'm looking at it right now.
You have quite an extensive vinyl collection. As somebody, I just started getting into vinyl collection myself.
Oh, it's the best.
What, how did you start getting into it? Like, what was what sparked your whole vinyl exploration?
I have no idea originally. I was like, I want a new hobby, and I love music. So like I love music, I love sports, but music is kind of like escapism in a kind of way. And I love all different kinds of music. I will never turn down a concert. If somebody invites me to a concert, like, do you want to go? Like, put it on the credit card. I don't care. I'm going. But how I got into vinyl collection, I don't know. I was just seeing it a lot, and I was like, that's something I could do and get into. And so I got my record player used, and then I went to, a lot of people at my station also collect. And so I went to our local record store, and I just picked up a couple, and then I just got into it, and it's built over time. There's a lot of small stores in Texas where it's pretty cheap. And then also eBay is a great place to get vinyls, because people sell them for like $10 or something and cheaper. And it's like great collector's items that, I don't know. I love it. It's something that keeps me like grounded and sane in the morning. And it sounds pretentious, but it's like my favorite way of listening to music. I think it's the most pure way. And it's really cool that it's coming back, because my grandpa like sent me a few of his, and he's like, I can't believe this is a thing again. I'm like, oh, it's a thing, and I love it. So like, keep them coming.
What's your like go-to record that you love to play the most?
I love soul and R&B, and so I have a live Otis Redding record. I think he was performing in LA and in the 70s. So it's like one of his live concerts. That's one of my favorites that I have.
Um, does like depend like what kind of changes your mood and far as far as like what you play and like what you don't like? Does it just depend on the day, like what you're feeling? Like what? How do you go about it?
It for sure depends on the day, and certain records I associate with seasons as well. So it changes throughout the seasons. Like Coming Home, Leon Bridges is such a fall record to me. So that was just playing like a couple weeks ago. And now I'm going to switch over to, I have a SZA record that's to me is just like December. I think it dropped like December 2022. And so like that's what I'll play. It really just varies on my mood. But I definitely like something calming and chill in the morning. And I always will have it playing when I'm cooking dinner or things like that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know for me, I have a Stevie Wonder songs in the key of life.
Oh, yeah, that's
Leon
great.
Bridges Beyond. Those are some of my
Yeah.
favorites. I think for me, like vinyl is just such a fun thing too, because you see the artwork. That's one of the things I love about it too, is like compared to an album, like you get to open it and it's like almost opening just a whole kind of picture book into this person's art and this person's life, right?
Yeah, for sure. I have friends that literally will just collect the albums themselves on display. And even when I'm like shopping for a record and I've never heard of it before, if it has a really cool cover, I guess like a book, I'll be like, oh, well, like I'm gonna get that because it just like looks really cool. So for sure, it's definitely art, and it's cool. So thank you for noticing that and bringing that up.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to. I know you always posted a lot, and so I was like, ah, oh, finally, somebody else is
Yeah,
into vinyl too. That's
yeah,
great. Awesome. So, before we close things out, I just want to ask a few like lightning round questions. Um,
yeah.
what's one thing that you feel like is slept on about Maryland, and one thing you feel like is slept on about Texas?
Oh, one thing that I think is slept on about Maryland, honestly, everything but the food. The food is really good in Maryland. I'm a seafood girl at heart, so if you want good seafood, Maryland's a place. Slept on in Texas. People think Texas isn't that pretty. It's like it's flat. Let me say that. But I think it's beautiful in its own way, and I drive a lot. So it's constant fence posts and ranches and just cattle everywhere. But to me, it's beautiful. My favorite part about Texas is the sunsets, though.
Yeah.
Those are not one word answers.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
it's totally fine. It's funny mentioning the flat part about Texas. I couldn't like
It's so
going from
flat.
San Diego, where like you're by the beach and the weather's immaculate every single day, and it's like going to Houston. I was almost like, what?
It's
Like, you know,
humid. It's
it
so
was
humid.
crazy. Just totally blew my mind. What's your
Yeah.
go-to like food place in Maryland and go-to food place in Texas?
Go to food place in Maryland. I don't think I have any specifically, but we always get crab legs in the summer. Love crab legs, my favorite food. In Texas, it's hard not to just pick a Tex-Mex place. Like throw a dart and you'll find one within 5 mile radius, no matter where you are. So for sure, Tex-Mex is top tier here. Also barbecue, if you're really into barbecue. I would say I just went to Terry Black's recently, and that was really good. So I guess I'll go with Terry Black's and then any seafood place in Maryland.
Yeah, I've heard people rave about Terry Black's, especially because there's like even it's so good
Yeah.
that there's a line outside. That's what I heard, and like all this stuff. I
Yeah.
just like, what's your go-to at Terry Black's?
I like pulled pork, so I would go with that. They have really good sides as well. Their cornbread's really good. Their mac and cheese is really good. Their green beans or beans, like anything, you can't go wrong.
If you had somebody visiting Maryland and Texas for the first time, what is one place that they should not miss, or one thing they shouldn't miss?
For Texas, my favorite city here is Austin. But if you want the most Texas experience, I say go to Fort Worth. It is close to Dallas, so you can still get a big city vibe. But Fort Worth is so Texas. They have a cattle run that they run through the middle of the street in Fort Worth. There's always rodeos and live music going on. So I would say if you want the Texas experience, go to Fort Worth and visit Dallas while you're up there as well. Maryland, I am a big sucker for the Maryland coast. I grew up going to Ocean City every year, so I would say go to the coast in Maryland, get some good seafood, go to the boardwalk, those type of things.
And then what's your like must-have essentials at as a sports reporter? Like, what's your like essentials? One thing you always have to carry on you, one thing you always have to have with you.
I always have to have a portable charger because I never know where I'm going to be and how long I'm going to be there. So a charger for sure, and then extra SD cards. That's always big for me. My biggest fear is getting to a shoot or something and realizing I don't have an SD card.
Have you had that happen to you before?
No. I've forgotten other things, but I've never forgotten an SD card.
Yeah, for sure. That's good. I know I was going to say the biggest thing for me as a producer is like always having a pen on me, because it's like, you never know what you're going to have to write down. And then also a headset, because obviously you can't do your job without one.
Yes, headphones are important too.
Yeah, that too. Before we close things out, Morgan, what's your final piece of advice for people pursuing journalism, getting in the field? What's your biggest piece of advice for them to be successful?
I think I said it earlier, but first and foremost, be where your feet are, but also always say yes. Obviously, not say yes to everything, but always say yes to opportunities, because that you never know what you're going to get from that opportunity. And it just shows you're willing. And I think you can teach a lot of things in this industry, and you can become more, and you can't teach talent, but you can never teach hard work. And I think that's one of the most important things. Say yes and be hardworking and just be easy to work with.
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice I always say is be kind to people, be kind and respectful.
Yeah.
Of course, I feel like this field can be very mentally draining on you, and it can cause you to kind of spill out your emotions in a way that, you know, is not well reciprocated. So I always say spread kindness and spread respectfulness towards people. And then also one of my biggest things is don't give up on yourself. I know it can be very hard. For me, it was super hard. I remember going during COVID and balancing that in school. I thought about giving up on it, because I was like, you know, is it worth it? Like, because you encounter those moments, right, where it's like, do I want to keep going in this field? And I always say, just don't give up on yourself, and know that like your path and other people's paths are never the same, right?
Yeah, for sure. I always say be kind as well, because you never know who you're going to run into again. And people, especially in small markets, and I'm sure bigger markets well, but they know who you are. They watch you every night. And when they get to meet you, like, be kind and be gracious. And I always thank people so much for watching, because I know not everybody watches their local news. So I always say be kind to everybody you encounter, the SIDs, the hosts that work at the arenas, like everybody, because, you know, not just because you might get something out of it. It's never about that. It's just about making it a better environment to be in, or a better environment than it started when you arrive, right? But I forget what you said at that last part. But yeah, you said don't give up on yourself. Yeah, for sure. Cause it does get really hard, especially during the holiday season, when it's our busiest season, but also everybody else is home to see their families, and Thanksgiving and Christmas and other holidays, what have you. It definitely gets hard, but just remember your ultimate end goal. And if that ultimate end goal is still what you want, then it's still worth it.
Yeah, for sure. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Listeners, you can follow Morgan on Twitter at Morgan Weaver _. Catch her on KBTX News 3 on weekends, other days of the week too. She does amazing stuff. Morgan, thanks for coming on the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me.